Recording in progress.
Hello, so I'm recording this lecture and it's going to be about intersectionality and holistic approaches to anthropology from an intersectional perspective that looks at the importance of social justice as a holistic set of ideas. And I'm going to talk about the reading, which is from the syllabus, which is about intersectionality and holistic approaches to anthropological research. And I'm going to talk about the reading in relation to artistic work that I've discussed in the most recent book, which I published. And I will talk about specifically artistic work that touches on what I would term sovereign power and sovereign violence. So Giorgio Agamben is a really well-cited scholar whose work regarding what the author terms homo sacer is really one of the most interesting ideas, I think, that continues to be used in different contexts. And it is a theoretical concept that I think really travels across a lot of borders and disciplines. And Agamben is really interested in the idea of sovereign power and the capacity that a sovereign power has to kill with impunity. And the death penalty is an obvious example, but there are others. And obviously, police violence and the capacity for police officers to kill with impunity has been in the media, and it's formed the basis of the creation of the Black Lives Matter movement and other social movements. So Giorgio Agamben is arguably one of the most influential European philosophers of our time. And Agamben is regarded as one of Italy's most important and original philosophers. So in Homo Sacer, Agamben connects the problem of what the author terms pure possibility, potentiality, and power with the problem of political and social ethics. And so Agamben begins with Foucault's analysis of biopolitics. And I discussed biopolitics in the previous class. Biopolitics refers to the use of life, or the idea of life and the protection of life to govern populations. So taking his cue from Foucault's fragmentary analysis of biopolitics, Agamben probes with great breadth, intensity, and acuteness the covert or implicit presence of an idea of biopolitics in the history of traditional political theory. So essentially what Agamben is discussing is the capacity for a sovereign power, a king, a monarch, or someone who takes on the role of the sovereign power to kill with impunity. So the idea of a king who can behead someone is something that was common in a different time period. And yet, is this idea of sovereign powers who can kill with impunity still with us? Yes. And the example that Agamben gives, which is most well cited, is refugees. And Hannah Arendt, who is the German Jewish philosopher, also wrote extensively about refugees and authoritarian power in a well-cited essay called We Refugees. So the Holocaust is obviously the most kind of traumatic and global or transnational, the kind of most remembered, I guess, example of the capacity that a sovereign power would have to kill with impunity and with no reference to law or even basic humanity. So Agamben has published an essay called We Refugees, which is about Hannah Arendt's article, which was published in 1943, also titled We Refugees. So the capacity for someone or for a group of persons to act as sovereign powers and to kill with impunity is obviously also in existence or is a recurring theme in the global north with the rise of white nationalism. So I'll discuss holistic anthropology, and I will continue to make reference to Agamben and the idea of uh, homo sacer and those who can kill with impunity. The holistic anthropology approaches conceive of particular phenomena such as identifications in larger contexts and attempt to make sense of concrete observations and encounters by placing them in larger cultural, social, political, economic, and historical contexts. These contexts are in turn underpinned by thick empirical ethnographic data. However, this understanding is not a standalone feature of the anthropological approach. Even though scholarship often focuses on identities individually, they are not lived, experienced, and embodied individually. Rather, they are interwoven as theorized by intersectionality frameworks. So the author draws on intersectionality, the concept from Kimberly Crenshaw, to discuss holism. Holism is a heuristic concept or a regulative ideal that guides an ethnographic way of inquiry towards discerning parts of unexpected social wholes and social wholes and parts. So what the author is interested in is how one cannot really approach a social whole if they only look at very privileged people and their very privileged lives, or if they only approach life itself from a vantage point they see as objective without considering their specific social location. Intersectionality aids in studying how and why people identify and interrelate with others in their lives, in their life context, and how and why they leverage their identifications politically. So rather than think of identity, the author is interested in identifications and the ways that people identify or choose to identify, and how this kind of shapes their scholarly inquiry and their capacity to make truth claims. So Michel Foucault discusses the idea of a regime of truth. And a regime of truth is not really the truth. It is a way of speaking about something, creating a discourse about something, and repeating certain messages over and over again until they become true. So nationalism is a good example of a regime of truth, that one repeats certain stories about a nation state over and over again until these stories become true. The problem is that depending on who is producing the discourse of nationalism, nationalism can actually mask barbarism. And the Holocaust is obviously one of the strongest examples of the ways that this regime of truth about nationalism masked the actual killing of persons for financial gain. So I will discuss 4 ideas in relation to this idea of holistic anthropology and also in relation to Homo sacer. Firstly, political aesthetics. Is it possible that aesthetics and visual images can contribute to nationalism? Can aesthetics and visual images contribute to the degradation of life and to the creation of partial ideas of citizenship that normalize the extrajudicial killing of persons by sovereign powers? I would argue that yes, they can. After the murder of Trayvon Martin, Jason Silverstein wrote an article called The Empathy Gap. And Silverstein argues that when people in the United States of America see images or see media, news reports, film, television, social media of Black people suffering, they are so used to seeing Black people in images of impoverishment and suffering that they normalize these images. They often do not feel any empathy for those who suffer because they assume that if one is a person of color, an immigrant, someone who is not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, they are used to suffering or they deserve their suffering. However, when people see images of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who are poor, who are suffering, who are unemployed, who have any problems, they feel a great deal of empathy. They feel as though these people must have been victims of some sort of crime. And what Silverstein argues is that the media plays a huge role in depicting those who are in privileged positions or imagined to be in privileged positions and imagined to be middle class as victims. And this is specifically true of news media that often depicts the ideal victim of crime to be white. And Silverstein's research is supported by feminist research, which has often looked at the ways that white, able-bodied, cisgender women are likely to be thought of or believable as victims of sexual violence or domestic violence, as opposed to other groups of women. So aesthetics, media, all of these kind of productions of national culture then support the possibility that someone's claim to be a victim of crime will not be believed, and that someone will then continue to be a victim of crime until they die. So in the 1960s, neo-Marxists, including partisans of Louis Althusser, elevated the categories of the material and the social over those of the individual or subjective. And the 1960s gave rise to a lot of radical art movements that sought to challenge the dominant images of media and artistic work. Feminist artists in the 1960s and 70s really troubled this idea of the happy family and the happy housewife in their artistic works.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Betsy Allen. I'm the Visiting Director of Ceramics and Expanded Media, and I'm going to introduce the speakers tonight. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your phones. It's a good thing to do, so I'll let you do that if you haven't already. Anderson Ranch would like to acknowledge that our campus resides on the traditional ancestral territory of the Ute people, who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond their home for 800 years. Tonight's program will consist of 2 lectures followed by a Q&A. First, I would like to introduce our very own Joanne Songwon Lee. Yeah. Joanne is our coordinator for ceramics here at Anderson Ranch. Originally from South Korea, Joanne Songwon Lee received her BFA from New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University with a concentration in ceramics in 2015. After graduation, she moved back to South Korea for an artist in residence program at the Korea Ceramic Foundation, Ichon Serapia. She completed an MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art in 2019 and achieved the Franz Rising Star Project Scholarship Outstanding Performance in Porcelain Design in that same year. After graduating, she finished her residency at Sonoma Ceramics in Sonoma, California. And in 2021, Joanne taught numerous ceramics courses for various levels at the James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Please join me in welcoming Joanne to the podium.
Thank you, Betsy. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne. Welcome to my talk. I'm quite nervous right now, so I'm going to kind of talk about my whole ceramics life story, how I started and ended up here. So starting point. So this is my mom and dad. My dad is an engineer, and my mom was a classical vocalist. And I'm an only child.